Hello, my name is Charles, and today we're going to be talking about Vertex Colour in terms of 3D modeling and how we can apply Vertex Colour in Unreal Engine. So, what is Vertex Colour? Well, it's probably easier for me to just show you, and we'll kind of explain it as we go along. So, before we jump into the engine, the first thing we should do is actually talk about what is Vertex Colour. Where does it come from? Where does it go? Where does it come from, Cotton Eye Joe? So if we just grab this cube, and we're actually just going to subdivide it a few times. That's probably good enough. And then what we will do is up top left, we're just going to go Vertex Paint mode. And you can see here, if I just select a color, you know, purple or something, we can just paint on this cube. Now this color data here, you could kind of think of it as a texture that is built in to the object itself. So what we'll do, we will go to paint. We're just going to set this to be black to begin with. Set vertex colors. We can go, you know, red. Let's put red up here for an effect of some sort. And then let's just add some I don't know, green for good measure. And we'll do that on this side. And then just for the sake of it, let's do like a little line of blue along the middle, like around the middle, like this. Just for fun, you know, sometimes it's good to have fun. Cool. Now, one thing that you will notice about when we're painting stuff here, if I paint with a really intense brush stroke, so if I just paint right here, you'll see that it's kind of got this pixely pattern to it. Now, the reason that we're getting this kind of pixely, you know, weird pattern is because this is limited by the verts of the mesh. So you can see here, if I paint this corner, it's going to say this corner's red, this corner's red, this corner's red, this corner is white, and that's why we get this sort of square pattern. Now this can be masked pretty effectively in Engine, and that's one of the things that we'll actually take a look at. So I'm going to go ahead and export this cube to Unreal, and we're going to investigate a little bit further. But before we do that, we're going to talk about the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. As of late, Skillshare has become my go-to when it comes to learning new skills, brushing up on existing skills, and really just expanding my knowledge in general. Recently, I was watching Jazza Brooks, who is a fellow Aussie, his 28-day drawing challenge, Anatomy for Illustrations and Comics. And I always find 2D art tutorials really useful when, you know, working in the 3D space, because at the end of the day, everything gets projected into our eyeballs in 2D. And so knowing how things are supposed to look rather than, you know, what shape they're supposed to be when you look at them from every angle can really just inform you on what things need to be accentuated when you're doing, you know, 3D modeling or animation. So if you would like to join me and the many others using Skillshare, make sure that you click the link in the description. The first 1,000 people to use that link will receive 1 free month of Skillshare. So thank you once again to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. So we've got our cube, we've put it into our scene, and it's just white. It's just a default material. What we need to do is go into our material editor, and we're going to recall the Vertex Colour node. Wowee. And if we plugged in the RGB channel, then this will show up like it did in Blender. Now, the majority of the time, you will be using this for utility purposes. So you'll probably be isolating the individual channels to use for some effects and some masks and stuff. So if we look at just the red channel, this is what it looks like. If we look at just the green channel, this is what it looks like. If we look at just the blue channel, then this is what it looks like. So far this has been absolutely useless. However, you can do a lot of complex material effects with Vertex Colour. Now, keep in mind, Vertex Colour, as we saw in Blender, is very low resolution, or at least it's limited to the resolution of the vertices of the mesh. But there are ways that we can add detail to break up this gradient. So one of those ways is using a height lerp, which I have a video about up here. It's on my channel somewhere. Just look up height lerp. And the way we set one of them up is we get our transition value, which is going to be the vertex color in this case. We multiply it by 2. We get a texture that we're using as the kind of height texture. I'm going to use a brick wall, and its height data is in the B channel. We're going to get that, subtract 1, we add these together, and then we apply some contrast. And just to make this look a little bit more appealing and a little bit more relevant, I'm just going to set this material up so that it lerps between a brick pattern and a kind of destroyed rock stone pattern. So we've got our brick texture here. This would usually be a normal map and a height map, but I do some funky stuff to, you know, not do that. We're going to use a lerp using this transition value between this and our other texture, which is going to be our wall 03 texture. That's going to go into here. This is then going to go into the normal. The color we're going to get rid of. We're going to go between a nice kind of bluestone color and a kind of more broken sandstony color. And we're also just going to get our text coords and make this tile a little more. All right, and now if we up the contrast a little again, then you can see this is starting to look like, you know, an actual effect. We've got our broken stone color, which I'm gonna make a little bit more blue because it's just looking a little bit too too different. And we've got our brick pattern here. Everything is awesome. Everything is cool. And so what we can do with this is we can actually edit this per cube. So if we add 2 cubes, maybe a few cubes all stacked on each other, then we can actually select all of these. We can go up here to select mode. We can go mesh paint mode. And these that we made in Blender, these are going to be the default vertex colors. But we can actually adjust these. So if we go to our red channel only, we're just going to completely turn these black. Now we can actually view this as off. But even though the you know, color view is off, we can still paint. So we go paint color, red, and we'll go strength of, I don't know, 0.2. We can start painting and you can see that it is actually, you know, doing our effect. And this can be painted across meshes. So these 2 meshes, completely different, but now they look like they're one mesh because we've kind of unified them through the power of Vertex Colour. Ta-da! We have an effect, we have this kind of broken stone parts, and we have our regular stone brick parts, all through the magic of Vertex Colour. Now you might be wondering, why don't we just use decals for all of these kind of grunge effects and that kind of thing? Decals, each decal will be a draw call. It's also a pretty expensive effect to project a decal onto something. Obviously decals have their place if you need it to be done in the pixel stage, so they're not limited by, you know, the density of the verts and that kind of thing. So if you need to put a piece of writing on a wall or some signage or something like that, decals might be the way to go. But for general kind of, you know, nitty gritty grunge and extra detail like this, Vertex Colour is super powerful. Now, one other thing we can do with Vertex Colour that we can't do with decals is we can actually apply world position offset effects, as well as like bump offset and parallax effects and all that kind of thing. So for example, if we get our red and we multiply this by our vertex normal world space, and then multiply this by probably a negative number, and then put that into our world position offset. So we can actually, you know, take chunks out of this wall by using Vertex Colour. Obviously, this mesh isn't ideal because it doesn't have smooth corner verts. We could rectify that pretty easily, but for demonstration purposes, we can deform meshes using the Vertex Colour. Another thing we could do, which would be a little less, I guess, destructive than this, we could use this same mask to do a bump offset using this. That's going to be our height. And then this bump offset is going to be what goes into our broken, these are dinted inwards. Just to kind of exaggerate the effect, I'll just add an offset. So you can see here, if I adjust the value that's going into the height of the bump offset, these start to kind of move backwards. A very subtle but very nice effect. So what if we wanted to add yet another layer to this stuff? Maybe we want to add kind of like a moss effect or something. So what we could do, we could use our green channel to drive a lerp. Now, the ordering of these lerps is actually important. So we kind of need to decide, is this recent damage that would take moss off of this thing? Or does the moss just go over, you know, these broken parts? I'm going to go with the moss goes over both of these. So with our lerps, the lerp that goes into the moss is going to go after. Now, one thing that's going to get a little bit more complicated is that our broken stone texture has its own height map, and we want the moss to blend using that as well. So let's chuck down another lerp. This one is going to go into that one. The alpha is going to be another height lerp like this. So we could actually use our RGB value into our multiply, and then maybe we'll just break float 3, and we're going to put the R back into where it was going before, but now we're going to be using the G to do its own thing. So we get these. Excuse the messiness as well. I'm just going to get rid of the bump offset just to clean things up a bit more. So what we're going to do, we're going to use this value here to lerp between the height map of our broken wall and our regular brick wall height maps. So it's a lerp between height maps, and then that height map is going to be the one that goes into the height lerp, which then goes into the alpha that lerps, you know, the color. So we'll get like a green mossy color, and also the texture for our moss, which is going to be, I don't know, moss normal map. And then here where our normals are, we just need to put this in there, and our normals into there. Right, we've plugged it all in, and now, as you can see, over on this side, we've actually already got the effect working, because obviously our default cubes had, you know, some color on them. Let's select all these again. We're going to go into mesh paint mode once more. Let's paint just on the green channel. So we're going to deselect red and blue. And let's start painting. If we just paint white, it's only going to paint in the green channel because we've only got the green enabled. So if we just start painting, you can see that we start getting mossy buildup on our stuff. Now, there's something going wrong here. And the thing that is going wrong is the height maps that this is using to lerp are incorrect. They're around the wrong way. So let's just fix that real quick. It'll be this one and that one. There we go. So you can see this is going in between the cracks first of our brick thing. And it's also starting at the kind of crevices of this texture. And if we do it like at the edge, you can see that it's using both of them, you know, pretty seamlessly. So there you go. There's a mossy effect using the same Vertex Colour stuff. It looks beautiful. Now, so far, we've only used it to kind of lerp between textures and colors and that kind of thing. What if we wanted to just kind of add an effect over the top of it? So for example, I'm going to set up my glossy cell shader thing. And so if we look at this now, you can see that everything is shiny looking. However, what we want to do, we want to get our Vertex Colour once again, we're going to use the blue. Blue is like water. Wow. And we're going to multiply this effect by the blue channel. Specular. And we're also going to darken the colors. So if we get our base color and we, I don't know, lerp between whatever the color would be and the color multiplied by, maybe we'll do like a kind of darker blue, like that color. And then we use the same vertex color here onto there, this into the base color. We hit save. And now when we go to our Vertex Paint mode, Mesh Paint mode, go Paint, let's go to our blue channel only. If we, let's say this was like in water or something, we can now paint water onto, you know, the bottom of this mesh. If we did that, okay, that's a bit too blue. Let's tone it down a tad. There we go. That looks nice and saturated. So yeah, if this was like a tower in the water and we wanted, you know, this part of it to be wet, and, you know, change the color and change, I guess you would change like the roughness in a standard PBR setting. Now we can do that. Now I do something similar in my scenes, to do with like water. I use one of the channels to exclude parts from getting wet. So for example, I have this like global wetness value for when it's raining. So dry, wet. There's also like a rain value as well, which does this kind of, you know, dripping water pattern over everything. But if something was, you know, underground or undercover, we wouldn't want it to be, you know, wet and or dripping with rain, or like having this kind of rain patterning effect on it. So what we need to do is click on it, select mode, mesh paint, and I believe for this setup, we just erase the blue channel, and that will exclude it from this effect. So try not to think of Vertex Paint as, you know, only adding effects. You can also use it to exclude effects as well. Now, on the topic of masking out effects or excluding effects, one thing that it's very commonly used for is with foliage. So let's just say I've got this big tree. It looks incredible, very stylized, very Ghibli. And if we look at its vertex color, then you'll see that it's probably going to look a little bit crazy. But if we look at it individually, you'll see that there's a lot of data going on. Now, the red channel is being used to paint the tips of the leaves. So the tip of the leaf is white, and the, you know, where the leaf hits the branch is black. I believe the green channel here is for pivot points, maybe? Or maybe it's just like clumping. Yeah, you know, I think the green is being used to isolate the individual branches to different colors. And the blue channel is being used for just isolating the branches from the tree. So the tips of the branches are white, the inside of the tree is black. So if we just get the, you know, the default Unreal wind, and we put the intensity and the weight and the speed at 1, and we multiply this by the red channel, then you can see I've plugged it into the wrong channel. So let's plug that into there, and then we're going to plug this into the well position offset channel. There we go. Now you can see here that only the tips of the leaves are being affected. The bits that, you know, join to the branch aren't being affected. And so this is how we actually fix, you know, foliage kind of floating all over the place and like breaking apart and all that kind of stuff. It's with the power of Vertex Colour. So as you can see, with just the few little examples that we've gone over today, Vertex Colour is extremely, extremely powerful. Now, there are a few limitations to it. You might think that, versus decals, which decals you can just like, hit a wall and spawn a decal and everything's good. You might think that this, Vertex Paint stuff loses that battle. However, in a follow-up video, we're going to be looking at a really good set of tools for runtime vertex painting, which is I'm very excited for. Another limitation of Vertex Colour is you do only get 4 channels. However, we can theoretically, with a few kind of exceptions, extend that to 8 channels by doing something I like to call reverse packing, which I'll give you a little demonstration of right now. So if we get a cube, and with this cube, we are going to drive our moss and our damage from the same channel. They're both going to come from the red channel. The way we do this is with a bit of math and a little bit of extra setup. So the first thing that we need to assume is that the default color of our vertex, channels and stuff is going to be 0.5. So if we go paint, we're going to get all channels. We're going to put this down to 0.5. And that's what we're going to color this. Now, this might be something that you do in Blender beforehand. You could also do it on Mesh Import. There's an option to override your Vertex Paint settings. And you can set the override color, so you could just set it to be 0.5. Now, as you can see, this is becoming a broken mess because we haven't changed the material yet. What we're going to do is we're going to assume that 0.5 is like the neutral point where there's no effect applied at all. So, assuming that, we are going to subtract 0.5. That's going to bring our midpoint down to 0. Then what was 0 is now going to be negative 0.5. And what was 1 is going to be 0.5. Then we're going to multiply it by 2. And so now we've expanded this to a range of -1 to 0 to 1. And so what we will do is we will actually take that negative. We can do that just by multiplying by -2 here. We're going to saturate, which is going to kind of clamp it between 0 and 1. And now we've kind of broken out these 2 channels. And we're going to use this one for wherever the red was going previously. Actually, we can just take it from here. And this one's going to go from where the green was. Okay, so looking at this, we just have our blank default wall. And if we go to Mesh Paint mode, we go to Paint, we are just going to deal with the red channel. If we paint white here, it's going to do our broken effect. If we paint black here, it's going to do our mossiness. However, it isn't going at full power, and the reason for that is these still actually need to go multiplied by 2 before they go into the height lerp, because the height lerp's transition value needs to be multiplied by 2, and now we have the full effect. Obviously, I'm drawing it very strongly, and if we want to go back, we go back to 0.5, and we're good, and we have all these effects, on one channel only, which is very cool. Now, if we went and tried to draw these on top of one another, they would fight. And that's because this is 0.5, this is 0, and this is 1. And if we look at this in color view mode, you can see here, if we try and paint, no red here versus red here, there's always going to be this gradient between them. And this is where, 0.5 hovers around this part. And that's why we can't paint them both at the same time. So there's that example there. That also works with any kind of texture or any, thing that you're using colors for. The old, what did I call it? Inverse packing, negative packing. I don't know. There's probably an actual term for it, but we don't use actual terms here on this channel. So to sum it up, if you have some effects that are exclusive from one another, meaning they're never going to need to be painted on top of each other. For example, if we had this moss and we had like a burnt effect, you know, you could say that, okay, well, the burning effect always overrides the moss because it burns the moss away or something. And maybe, you know, you've got some effect that applies like some pixel normal, like sand or dirt coverage, but maybe you make that exclusive with the, you know, the water level effect, because the water would like wash away the dirt or the sand or the whatever. Any excuse is a good excuse to squeeze out a little bit of extra data. Lay down. Cat, no. Can you lay down, please? Can you just relax? I'm trying to do video. Sit. Now sit. Stay. Stay. So, I think before we wrap up this video, I would highly suggest you follow me on Twitch, because I stream there most days of the week. We're always learning new things, you know, like this kind of stuff. And it's a really good opportunity to ask questions about any of the, you know, tutorials and guides that you've seen on the channel. We also have a Discord channel, which has recently been promoted to a Discord partners channel. So the link will be in the description. It's a community hub where we just help each other make games, basically. Lastly, but not leastly, I do want to thank the very lovely patrons who continue to support me making these videos and working on Prismatica, the game. You guys are very, very cool, and I really appreciate all of the support. As I mentioned earlier in the video, you can get 1 month of Skillshare if you use code PrismaticaDev or follow the link in the description. Now, I will be doing a second part to this video, that is, if this is called part 1, where we're actually going to look at some more advanced, you know, Vertex Paint applications. We're also going to look at a very affordable, I repeat, affordable plugin that does some incredibly complex and useful stuff to do with Vertex Paint. So I hope you're all excited for that. And I guess with that, we say goodbye. Goodbye.